If you want to cut your risk of a running injury almost in half, the secret isn't a new pair of carbon-plated super shoes.
No, it definitely isn't.
It's actually what happens while you are standing completely still, just looking at a message on your phone. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, our mission is to uncover the reality of a concept we're calling running coach benefits, more than speed. Because, well, the narrative around setting a fitness goal, especially running, is usually entirely focused on effort. We just assume the biggest hurdle is, tying your shoes and getting out the door.
Right, the whole just do it mentality.
Exactly. But when you look at the data, the biggest hurdle isn't the physical exertion itself. It's this massive, dangerous gap between having a training plan and actually surviving it without falling apart.
It is a phenomenal gap, and one that's just deeply misunderstood by most people. Going from a sedentary lifestyle, or honestly even just a casually active one, to structured running is a period of immense physiological and psychological vulnerability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The body and the mind are suddenly under this completely new type of stress, and most people are entirely unequipped to manage it alone.
So to understand how to actually navigate that stress, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got academic research on novice athletic development, some practical guides written for athletes, and some really sharp insights from the fitness platform Sundried.
Yeah, Sundred had some great points on this.
They really did. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to use a brilliant analogy from Sundried. They point out that most beginners treat a running program exactly like a flat-pack furniture manual.
Well, I love that analogy because it perfectly illustrates the flaw in our thinking. You get the box, you lay out the pieces, and you just follow step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right, and you completely ignore those weird little niggles in your knees, which is basically the biological equivalent of having, 3 wooden pegs and a screw left over at the end of the build. You just push the furniture against the wall, hope for the best, and then you wonder why the whole thing just collapses on itself after 6 weeks.
It collapses because a static manual or, a static PDF running plan you downloaded off the internet, it just cannot account for the dynamic nature of a human body learning a new skill. To understand why generic plans fail so spectacularly, we have to look at what's called cognitive load theory.
Okay, cognitive load theory.
Yeah, so when you are a novice runner, your intrinsic cognitive load is incredibly high. The simple act of moving your arms, regulating your breathing so you don't feel like you're pulling air through a straw.
Which is how I always feel, by the way.
Right. And pacing yourself on top of that takes up all of your mental bandwidth. The movements just aren't automatic yet.
So you are basically overthinking every single step.
Precisely. And because your brain is maxed out just trying to keep you moving forward, you lack what we call internal proprioceptive data.
Proprioceptive data, meaning knowing where your body is in space.
Exactly. It's that physical self-awareness to know in real time if your form is actually correct.
Yeah.
You might think you're gliding effortlessly down the pavement, but mechanically, you are just hammering your joints. And this leads to what researchers call the weekly drift.
The weekly drift. I mean, that sounds like a bad 1970s horror movie.
It is absolutely the enemy of the beginner. It's the accumulation of small, unnoticed errors over several days. Let's say you spend Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday running in the gray zone.
The gray zone being?
That pace that is too fast for your aerobic development, but way too slow to be proper speed work. Now, in a traditional coaching model, you have a weekly check-in, right?
Yeah, you talk to them on the weekend.
Right. So the coach looks at your data on Sunday and says, oh, you ran too fast all week and your stride was off. But by Sunday, the physiological damage is already done. The stress is compounded.
I see the logic there, but let me challenge that for a second. Doesn't a weekly check-in, or even just looking at the stats on your smartwatch after you get home, eventually catch those errors? Why do we need the feedback instantly while we are literally sweating on the pavement?
That is the million-dollar question.
Mm-hmm.
And the data reveals something incredible here. Research utilizing instrumented insoles and mobile algorithms showed that runners receiving real-time, instantaneous feedback experienced a 47% reduction in injury risk.
Wait, 47%? Just from real-time feedback?
Yes. The researchers actually noted a hazard ratio of 0.53.
Wait, hazard ratio? Are we talking about toxic waste here? What does that actually mean for the person running?
Right. It sounds intense. In statistical terms, a hazard ratio of 0.53 means you are essentially cutting your risk of an injury event in half, simply by correcting the error the exact second it happens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the underlying mechanism here is a psychological concept called desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty.
Yes. When a coach or a device tells you to fix your form mid-run, it links the correction directly to the action. Your brain has to work to make the physical adjustment in that exact moment of fatigue, and doing that rapidly strengthens the neural pathways associated with correct form.
So if real-time feedback is cutting the risk of blown-out knees and shin splints in half, we really need to talk about exactly what is being corrected in the moment. The sources dive deep into these spatiotemporal metrics. Are we talking about the space-time continuum here? How does that relate to my sneakers?
It sounds like astrophysics, I know. But spatiotemporal simply refers to space, so your stride length and time, which is your cadence or step frequency.
Okay, cadence.
And cadence is the metric that jumps out immediately. The gold standard for running efficiency is hitting between 170 to 180 steps per minute.
Which, if you've never tracked it, feels incredibly fast for most beginners. It literally feels like you were shuffling.
It does feel like a shuffle at first. Most beginners naturally fall into a heavy, slow cadence, usually under 160 steps per minute. And the mechanics of this are quite destructive.
How so?
Well, when your cadence is that slow, you are almost certainly overstriding. Your foot is landing way out in front of your center of mass, and every time it hits the ground, it acts as a literal brake.
So instead of gliding, you are essentially driving a car with the handbrake ripped all the way up, just over and over again.
That's a great way to visualize it. I mean, Sundry talks about this too. Your biomechanics, the chassis of the car, cannot handle the output of the engine when you run like that. You're playing Russian roulette with your shins.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is where the concept of Zone 2 discipline and the 80-20 split comes into play. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the physiological goal of novice running isn't just about moving your legs, it's about building an aerobic base.
But left to our own devices, we just want to run fast. We want to finish the workout dripping in sweat so we feel like we actually accomplished something, you know?
Exactly. Human nature works completely against us here. Left alone, novices run way too fast. They're constantly pushing into zone 3 or 4, which just floods the body with stress hormones.
Right.
A real-time coach acts as an external governor. They pull the athlete back, they say slow down, drop into zone 2. This lowers cortisol levels and builds that massive aerobic base safely. It's about treating the athlete as a whole engine.
A whole engine.
Yes. A good coach isn't just looking at pace. They are integrating your sleep data, your nutrition, your daily recovery metrics. They are servicing the chassis so the engine can actually run.
Okay, so dialing in the biomechanics and governing the heart rate keeps the joints safe. But what fixes the brain? I mean, what stops a beginner from just quitting when it's 30 degrees, it's pouring rain, and they've had a terrible day at the office? This brings us to the psychological resilience required to actually stick to a plan.
This is where we see a fascinating paradigm shift from a transactional coaching model, the whole here's your PDF, talk to you next week thing, to a deeply relational one. The psychological architecture of this modern coaching is built on what's called the 3+1 C's model.
Okay, the 3+1 C's.
Right. That stands for closeness, commitment, complementarity, and co-orientation.
Okay, closeness and commitment I get. You build a bond with your coach. But if my coach is literally just a digital entity communicating with me on WhatsApp, how do we actually align on anything? I can't even see them in person to gauge their reactions.
That is exactly where the last 2 C's come in. Complementarity is the cooperative nature of your interactions. So how will you work together to solve a problem remotely?
Okay.
And co-orientation is the degree to which your perceptions are aligned. Are you both seeing the goal of the training plan the same way? High-frequency messaging, having a coach available 24/7 on your phone accelerates all 4 of these pillars much faster than seeing someone in person just once a week.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The research also mentions that for this to work, the novice needs to have an incredibly low question threshold, meaning literally no question is too stupid.
Yes, absolutely.
But how does texting your coach about what socks to wear or whether you should eat a banana before a 3-mile run actually prevent you from burning out?
Because ambiguity breeds anxiety. And anxiety invariably leads to burnout. Think about a typical morning for a beginner. You wake up, your calf feels a little tight, and you have a scheduled interval run. Ambiguity sets in immediately. Should I run? Will I injure myself? Am I just being lazy?
Oh, I've been there.
Right. And if you have to wait 3 days for an email reply from a coach, that anxiety spirals.
You probably just skip the run and then feel guilty about it all day.
Exactly. The guilt compounds. But if you can text your coach instantly, the ambiguity vanishes. They can tell you to stretch, swap the run for a walk, or reassure you that it's just normal fatigue.
Ah,
Furthermore, this constant availability triggers what psychologists call the Hawthorne effect.
I've heard that term. Is that the behavioral theory where people act differently just because they know someone is watching them?
Yes, exactly. Continuous observation creates continuous accountability. In a weekly check-in model, athletes often engage in quiet quitting. They miss a Tuesday run, feel guilty, miss Thursday, and eventually fade away entirely.
Or they do the exact opposite, which is binging on workouts right before the Sunday check-in to make their data look good on paper.
Exactly. But when you know a coach is actively watching your daily data and is ready to message you, that consistent observation fosters real, lasting habit formation.
Which brings up the absolute most practical question we could ask today. With all this established science and psychology, how does an average person access this? Historically, having a coach in your pocket 24/7 meant you were an Olympian or,
Right.
independently wealthy.
It is a very valid concern because historically, that level of access was reserved strictly for the elites. But the landscape of coaching has completely democratized.
Yeah, the sources highlight a modern tool that perfectly encapsulates this solution, and it's Coach Ray, found at ray.dap. Sundry describes this model as having a mechanic in your pocket. And what's fascinating is that Coach Ray lives entirely on WhatsApp.
And the beauty of a platform like that living on WhatsApp is the seamless integration into the tools the athlete already uses every single day. There is zero friction. You don't have to log into a clunky web portal to see your schedule.
The feature set they describe is wild when you compare it to a static plan. As an analyst reading through this, what stands out to you about how a platform like Ray actually executes this 24/7 model?
It's the granularity of the support.
Hmm.
We are talking about 5 a.m. check-ins to ensure you're awake and motivated.
Wow, 5 a.m.
Yes, they send prompts for myofascial release, basically foam rolling, and 5-minute box breathing exercises for mental focus. And it's not just running either.
Really?
Yeah, if you're an athlete training for a sprint triathlon, Coach Ray provides specific swimming cues, like reminding you to maintain a high elbow catch phase before you even get in the pool.
That's incredible.
And perhaps the most vital feature for busy professionals. It includes a live dashboard where you can literally drag and drop your schedule. If life gets in the way, you move the workout, and the plan instantly adapts around your reality.
It's adapting to your life rather than forcing you to adapt your life to a static PDF. And to prove that this high-touch contact isn't just a digital gimmick, the research points to the South End on-sea ecosystem as a phenomenal real-world case study. Down in Southeast England, practitioners have built their entire business models around this constant communication philosophy.
The South End ecosystem is a perfect microcosm of this shift. You have practitioners like Running Joe, which utilizes an agony auntie WhatsApp model.
Agony auntie.
Yeah, basically being always available to support the emotional ups and downs that plague beginners. You also have PW Performance, focusing on rapid plan adaptation via phone and text to prevent overuse injuries. And Pace to Peak, offering continuous feedback to ensure athletes stay on track.
It's an entire ecosystem proving that the 24/7 relational model is what actually gets people across the finish line. Let's talk about the economic reality of this, though, because the math is pretty eye-opening for anyone who thinks they can't afford a coach.
The economics are perhaps the most compelling argument for the everyday runner. If you want traditional, in-person coaching in an area like South End, you are looking at paying roughly 40 to 45 pounds for a single 1-hour session.
So you get them for an hour, they watch you run, and then you are on your own for the other 167 hours of the week.
Exactly. However, for around 150 pounds a month, you can buy 30 days of 24/7 accountability through these high-frequency remote models like Coach Ray.
30 days of an expert in your pocket for the price of 3 hours in a park.
From a habit formation standpoint, it is a remarkably efficient tool. You aren't just paying for a training plan. You are paying for an ecosystem of daily accountability that prevents the weekly drift.
Okay, so let's say you take the plunge. You sign up for a 24/7 setup. What do you, the listener, actually have to do to make this work? Because you can't just be a passive participant waiting for text messages.
No, absolutely not.
It requires a pretty significant behavioral shift from the athlete. First, you have to be brutally honest about your niggles. A coach can only fix the chassis if they know it's under strain. Second, you have to trust the boring runs. Trust that discipline of slowness to build your aerobic base. And third, you have to sync your data constantly so your coach can make those tactical adjustments in real time.
Which raises an important question regarding that data syncing. How do you communicate the data that a smartwatch cannot capture? And that brings us to RPE, or the rate of perceived exertion.
We all know RPE is subjective. It's how hard the run actually felt to you on a scale of 1 to 10. But what's fascinating here is how withholding that subjective data completely breaks the modern coaching ecosystem.
It breaks it entirely. Your heart rate is objective data, but RPE is subjective biofeedback, and it is the missing puzzle piece. Let's say your coach prescribes a slow recovery run. You finish it, and your watch shows a slow pace and the low heart rate. On paper, to the coach looking at your dashboard, it looks like a perfect green checkmark.
Right. But inside, you felt absolutely miserable. Your legs felt like lead, and keeping that slow pace took everything you had.
Exactly. If that slow run felt like a 9 out of 10 effort, your coach desperately needs to know that. That subjective feedback is the earliest warning sign of overtraining, impending illness, or accumulating life stress. And more than just reporting data, you need to ask your coach, why?
Why?
Yes. Why am I running at 170 steps per minute? Why are we doing intervals today? A great high-frequency coach wants you to become a student of the sport rather than just a blind follower of a daily text message.
It's about building autonomy through competence. You are learning the machinery of your own body. So, to synthesize everything we've unpacked today, from the research, the practical guides, and the insights from SunDried, a running coach is no longer just a static PDF generator designed only for race day speed. That era is over.
Completely over.
Today, a prepper coach is a real-time biomechanical governor. They are a 24/7 psychological safety net. They exist to prevent the weekly drift that injures so many beginners, and they are the catalyst that turns the intent of starting a running journey into the actual reality of becoming a runner.
They bridge the gap between human vulnerability and athletic achievement through constant, relentless support.
So if you are tired of trying to navigate all those weird aches and niggles alone, and you actually want a coach who will answer your questions, adapt to your chaotic schedule, and check in on you at 5 a.m., you need to check out Coach Ray at ray.app. It's time to stop guessing and start progressing.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've discussed today. We've seen how real-time digital feedback can literally outsource our physical self-awareness, protecting us from injury until our brains can build the neural pathways to do it automatically.
Yeah.
So, what other high-stress areas of your life could this apply to? Whether it's learning a complex new profession, managing the endless moving parts of a household, or mastering a new language. How entirely transformed would your life be if you had an expert living in your pocket, ready to course correct you the exact second you started to drift?